Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to another true crime and makeup video. Today we're going to be covering the case of Tracie Andrews, and wow, is she the worst. And today's case is from the UK, and I haven't done a UK case since Jigsaw. Wow, that was quite a while ago. I'm so sorry it's been so long. I do want to do them more often than that because I know you guys enjoy the UK cases. So the case on Tracie Andrews is a pretty infamous case in the UK. It kind of became like this shocking sensation. And there's a particular press conference that Tracie Andrews did that makes this case so infamous, which we will get onto, of course, in the case. And in this press conference, I don't want to give anything away, even though I know some of you probably have seen this press conference, but all was not as it seemed in that press conference. And I was too young when this case happened. I was too young to be aware of what was going on. It happened in 1996, but I have lived through other cases that have a similar kind of vibe to this one. I'm thinking Mick Philpott. Do any of you remember that? I will be doing that case at some point because wow. And I lived through that experience of the Mick Philpott case, so I can imagine the Tracie Andrews situation was very, very similar. And this case in particular as well is also so weird for me because it takes place in Birmingham in the UK, which is where I'm from. And what is like even more weird for me is that the places and the area of this case I know very well. Like, I've been there. I know the area because obviously I don't know the whole of Birmingham. But yeah, enough of my rambling. Let's jump into today's case and find out why Tracie Andrews is so infamous. So Tracie Andrews was born on the 9th of April 1969, which makes her an Aries. And today's case takes place in Alvechurch, which is like a small, I don't even know if you would class it as a town because it's really, really small, but a small town just outside of Birmingham. And Tracie lived in Alvechurch as an adult, and I couldn't actually find out where she was born and where she was raised, but her parents also live in Alvechurch, and I just kind of got the feeling that she was also born and raised in Alvechurch. And Tracie's parents had quite a volatile relationship, and her dad walked out when Tracie was 8 years old, and this really affected Tracie. It kind of stayed with her like all through her childhood and into her adult life. And when leaving school, Tracie did become a hairdresser for a short period of time, and then she went on to be a barmaid at the Red Lion pub in Alvechurch, but she had dreams of becoming a model. Like, that was what she wanted to do. She even had professional photos taken to put together a portfolio in hopes of becoming a model. At the age of 22, Tracie did fall pregnant and gave birth to a girl named Carla. The father of the child was her current boyfriend, Andy, and they had been together for around 4 years. They did split up shortly after the birth of Carla. And Andy puts the breakup down to the fact that Tracie was just quite aggressive, quite violent, and she would just get really worked up and angry over the smallest things. Now, a few years later, it's now 1994. Tracie is currently 25. She meets a man called Lee Harvey at a nightclub in Birmingham. And it's said that the two had like an instant attraction to one another. I don't want to say love at first sight, but it was like an instant connection. Now, Lee Harvey was born on the 20th of September 1971, making him a Virgo, and he is 23 years old when he meets Tracie. And he also grew up in Birmingham. He is from Kings Norton, I think, which again is so strange because I know Kings Norton quite well. And he worked as a bus driver, which was his dream job since he was a child. And like Tracie, he did have a daughter as well from a previous relationship whose name was Danielle. But another reason why this case is so weird for me, because it's the first case where someone has my name, which is always weird. And Lee is described by everyone that knows him as a family man. He's really close with his daughter Danielle, and he's really close with his parents and his sister. Okay, so going back to the nightclub now, which was the night that they met. Like I said, they hit it off straight away and they end up spending the night together. And their relationship moves very, very quickly, like so quickly. Literally, it's a whirlwind. Within 4 months of them meeting, Lee moves into Tracie's house and they start living together. However, the relationship was definitely not perfect. It was a pretty volatile relationship, to say the least. They would fight and argue constantly, and a lot of their arguments would stem back to the same issue, and that was Lee's relationship with his daughter's mom, Anita. So Lee's relationship with the mother of his child, Anita, they stayed civil, they stayed quite close for the sake of their daughter. And this really bothered Tracie. They're trying to just raise their daughter, you know, together, but they're obviously not together. They're just trying to do their best. And Tracie didn't like how close they were. I don't think there was anything going on between Lee and Anita, but Tracie just didn't like how close they were. I don't know if she was jealous or insecure or just a bit controlling. I don't know, but she just didn't like their relationship at all. But then at the same time, Lee also didn't like the relationship between Tracie and her daughter's father, because Tracie and her daughter's father also remained kind of close and civil to raise their daughter. Lee would often accuse Tracie of still having feelings for the father of her daughter, and vice versa. It was just very toxic, very volatile, and a lot of their arguments would always stem back to their relationship with their exes. However, this isn't the only source of tension in Lee and Tracie's relationship. Lee's family did not like Tracie at all. They didn't like how controlling she was. She was very self-obsessed. She was very arrogant. They just got a vibe from her. They just didn't like her. There just was like something off about her, you know? And this caused issues. I mean, it would, wouldn't it? And after a lot of the arguments that Tracie and Lee would have, they would actually break up. So Lee would pack his bags, move out of the house and go back and live with his mom. And then it was just like this constant cycle. Lee would go back to Tracie, then they would argue, break up, Lee would move out. One argument in particular like got so heated that Tracie took all of Lee's belongings, put them into black bin liners and chucked them out the window. I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I actually know someone in my life that did this. So Lee and Tracie were just like that couple. I feel like we all know a couple like Tracie and Lee that are just constantly arguing, constantly breaking up, constantly getting back together. However, there was this one incident where things just went way too far. So Tracie was going out with her girlfriends and she told Lee, like, I don't want you to come to the same nightclub as me. I just want to go out with my girlfriends. I don't want to see you. I don't want you to be around. I just want to go have fun with my girlfriends. But Lee turned up at the nightclub anyway. Now, I couldn't find out if this was a coincidence, like Lee just so happened to go to the same nightclub. Maybe he didn't know the nightclub that Tracie was going to, or whether it was done on purpose. But anyway, Lee ends up at the same nightclub as Tracie, and Tracie is so angry. She is causing a scene. She loses it. She gets so angry at Lee that she slaps him, she punches him, and then she bites him. And one of Lee's friends has said that it looked like someone had taken a bite out of an apple. I think the bite was on his neck. It looked like somebody had taken a bite out of an apple but didn't take the chunk away. Oh God, can you imagine? Oh God, that would have been painful. Oh God, anything with the neck freaks me out. I don't know why, So then after this incident, I don't know how long after this incident, Lee decides to propose to Tracie. I'm sorry, it's just like, why? But Lee proposes to Tracie because he thinks that if he proposes to Tracie, this will make the relationship a little bit more stable. Why do people always think that? What is a ring going to really do? Tracie is over the moon with this engagement and she's like trying to figure out, how do I announce this to everybody? Because if there is anything that you should know about Tracie is that she loves being center of attention. So announcing something like an engagement, she would have been in her element. So she's trying to plan out how to announce to the family that her and Lee are engaged. And there is a family barbecue coming up and she's like, this is perfect. We can announce it to everyone and then we can be the center of attention for the rest of the night. Okay, so Lee and Tracie arrive to the barbecue, but they do arrive a little bit late. Don't know why, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was because of an argument. So when they get to the barbecue, Lee's sister stands up and tells everybody that she's got an announcement to make. She announces to the whole family that she's engaged. Can you imagine? Tracie was not happy. She flew off the handles. She went crazy. She went crazy to like the whole family. She was shouting. She was saying that they all plotted this and did this on purpose. But it's like, Tracie, no one knew that you were engaged. Tracie seems like one of those people that feels like everyone is out to get them and everyone is plotting against them and everyone's trying to take their limelight away from them, which is just simply not the case most of the time. Tracie doesn't see it like this and she just thinks that Lee's family don't like her and have done this on purpose, which obviously they didn't. And then what creates even more drama between Tracie and Lee's sister Michelle is that there is a little bit of tension on Tracie's daughter, Carla, on whether she's going to be bridesmaid or not at Michelle's wedding. Oh, the family drama. I feel like we can all relate to this kind of drama. Tracie is so angry because of all of these issues on whether her daughter is going to be bridesmaid or not. She says that she's not going to go to the wedding. She is not going. But not only that, she tells Lee that he is not allowed to go to his sister's wedding. And that is the only way she will stay in a relationship with him, is if he doesn't go. He's not allowed to go to his sister's wedding because, I'm sorry, wow. And by some miracle, I don't know why, but Lee agrees to these terms. So Lee misses out on his sister's wedding. And as you can imagine, Lee's family are just so angry at this point. They're done with Tracie. And from this moment on, Lee's family, particularly Lee's mom, doesn't want anything to do with Tracie. They have wiped their hands of her. And then there is another twist to the story because Tracie falls pregnant, and Tracie and Lee are over the moon with this, and they decide between themselves that they kind of need to put their volatile relationship behind them, just make things a little bit more stable. I mean, they're bringing a child into this world now. However, 2 months later, Tracie had some terrible news. She'd actually suffered a miscarriage because she fell down some stairs when she was out, and Tracie and Lee really pulled together to try and get through this. And also Lee's family, which have up until now, they don't want anything to do with Tracie. They put all of the drama and everything behind them because they realize that this is bigger than some petty drama, and rally around Tracie and Lee to support them through this absolutely devastating time. However, it is not long before Tracie and Lee go back to their old ways and start arguing again and falling out, breaking up. And there was this one really big argument where it came out that Tracie never had a miscarriage. She actually had an abortion behind Lee's back. Oh God, it takes a special person to do that, doesn't it? It's sick. It's horrible. Lee is devastated about this. It's like, who does this? Really, like, who does this? But even after this, Lee decides to stick by Tracie. So I think we have a pretty good idea of the dynamic of Tracie and Lee's relationship. It was a train wreck, but Lee just can't seem to stay away from Tracie, and no one can understand why. But their relationship just carries on the same until the 30th of November, 1996. So on this day, Tracie is taking her own daughter and Lee's daughter out for the day, and Lee offers to take his own daughter, Danielle, home after the day out. Seems like a pretty normal thing to do, you know, nothing crazy or anything. However, Tracie doesn't see it like this. Tracie goes crazy at Lee offering to do this because in Tracie's mind, she thinks Lee is only offering to take his own daughter back to her house, to her mom, because Lee must be having a little thing going on with his ex. It's like Tracie, he's only offering to take his daughter home, like a normal dad. Anyway, to no surprise of any of us here, this ends up in a huge argument, probably the biggest one they've ever had. But after the dust settles on the argument, they decide, you know what, let's just calm down and let's go to the pub, let's have a few drinks. So they head to the Mulbrook pub in Bromsgrove, which is about a 10-minute drive from Tracie's house. They have a few drinks and they end up leaving the pub at 9:45 p.m. And this is where things take a turn for the worse. So Tracie and Lee are driving home. They take a normal route home, a route that they've been down many, many times. And a lot of the route is down some country lanes. So they're very narrow, very windy. However, on this night, they don't end up making it home. At 10:45 p.m, an hour after Tracie and Lee leave the pub, a couple in a cottage that live just off one of these country lanes hears screaming. They look out of the window and they see a couple, which is Tracie and Lee. They see a woman holding a man, and obviously it's Tracie holding Lee, and there is blood everywhere. So they immediately call the police, and Lee has suffered terrible injuries, and very sadly, he is pronounced dead when the police arrive. He had a total of 42 stab wounds, and these stab wounds were on his neck, his chest, and his back. And the wound that had proved to be fatal was a stab wound to the neck, which had severed an artery. Tracie had also suffered some cuts and bruises to her face. They were pretty superficial though, so overall she was fine. And Tracie is in hysterics. She can't really remember like specific details of of the attack and what happened. And she is taken to hospital for treatment. She does require some stitches on the injuries on her face. And while she is at the hospital, she's definitely behaving a little bit suspiciously. Something that the hospital staff did take note of, which at the time they didn't think was weird, but it is weird, so remember this little thing. She kept taking trips to the bathroom, like more than normal. So yeah, remember that. So after Tracie has received the treatment for her injuries, around 1 a.m. she is taken to Redditch police station for questioning. The police just want to know, like, what the hell happened. So Tracie says that when they left the pub at 9:45, they were driving down the country roads when a car came up behind them and was just looking for trouble. The car was honking the horn, it was flashing the lights, it was going really close to Tracie and Lee's car and then like backing off and then going really close again, like, you know, just being annoying, to which Lee was getting really frustrated with this other car, so much so that he actually pulls over and stops the car, and the car behind Tracie and Lee does the same. And then Lee and the driver of the car both get out of their cars and start going at each other. They're arguing. The argument just dies down. Lee goes to return to his car. The driver of the other car goes to return to his car. But then the passenger of the other car gets out. And before anyone can do anything, the passenger of the other car starts attacking Lee. So Tracie jumps out of the car. She tries to help Lee, but the passenger of the car turns around, calls her a slut and punches her in the face, which is how Tracie got all of her facial injuries. And then after this, the passenger of the other car returns to his car and the other car just drives off, to which Tracie finally can get to Lee and she can see just how badly Lee has been attacked. And it is at this point that Tracie realizes that Lee has been stabbed multiple times because there is so much blood everywhere. There is a pool of blood around Lee. The police ask Tracie for a description of the attacker, to which Tracie describes him as an older looking man who was wearing a donkey jacket. I didn't know what a donkey jacket was, so I had to Google it, but just like a regular jacket with like patches here. And this is her words, not mine, but she said, quote, "a fat man with starey eyes," end quote. Police then ask if she can remember the other car, and Tracie says, yeah, they were driving a Ford Sierra and it was a dark color, which the police find a little bit suspicious because when they arrived at the scene, Tracie couldn't remember anything about the other car. She couldn't remember any specific details, and now all of a sudden she can remember, which is quite plausible. Like, I don't really feel like that is suspicious at this point, because when you've just gone through something traumatic, you can't always remember the details, and then when you come out of the situation and you've calmed down and you've collected yourself, then you can remember things. So it's not too suspicious. However, the police do kind of note this and think, it's a little bit weird. The police also see the blood splatter on Tracie's clothes. And the police ask Tracie, like, how did this blood get all over your clothes, you know? And Tracie says that the blood must have come from when she found Lee on the floor and she was holding him. And that is how his blood got onto her. However, the police know that something's up right here because they're experienced in these things, you know? They know what blood patterns and everything look like on clothes. And they know that the pattern of the blood on Tracie's clothes is closer to that of an attacker rather than someone holding someone that has just been attacked. So again, the police are just like, something's not adding up here. This is like the second thing now that is a little bit suspicious. And I just want to point out, the police aren't the only ones that are suspicious of Tracie at this point. Lee's family is incredibly suspicious of Tracie. I mean, obviously, why wouldn't they? They know the history of the two of them, but they're so suspicious because they're like, Lee wouldn't do this. Like, Lee is not a violent man. He would not pull over and confront somebody. So they know that something's off. I don't know what they're quite thinking right now, but they know something's not quite right, and they know that Tracie is not telling the complete story and that she knows more. But anyway, the police go along with Tracie's story for now. So anyway, the police hold a press conference to try and raise awareness of the crime, to try and find any witnesses that can come forward to try and help them solve this and try and help them find this other car, the other attacker, because right now they don't really have much to go on. And they asked Tracie to speak out at this press conference, to which first Tracie is very hesitant. She doesn't really want to do it, but then she realizes, hang on a minute, I would be center attention if I did this press conference. Everybody's eyes are going to be on me. I'm going to be the victim. Everyone's going to feel sorry for me. I'm gonna do it. Like I said, if there's one thing you should know about Tracie, that she loves being the center of attention. So she just couldn't resist this opportunity. So when Tracie turns up at the press conference, all of the flashes are going from the media and she's probably like getting her little celebrity moment, you know, feeling herself. So Tracie starts by just retelling the story of the night that the murder happened and just that the car was following them, the car was harassing them, then Lee pulled over, there was a little bit of a confrontation, and then the passenger of the car got out and brutally murdered Lee.
We were just followed and chased along the lanes. It was a case of both Lee and the other person were like playing cat and mouse with each other.
And then she does something that completely shocks everyone. She looks to the camera and she starts speaking directly to the driver of that other car and starts saying, like, directly to the driver, please come forward. You're not in trouble. We know that you're not the bad person here. Just come forward. It's only the passenger of the car that the police want. You won't get into any trouble. And the police are like, what? That's not true. For starters, they are in trouble because they're an accessory to murder.
This person is that was with you, you obviously know him, but he's ruined my life and he's ruined the lives of Maureen and Ray. And please just tell us who he is.
In the press conference, Tracie's obviously in the middle and you can see one of the officers next to Tracie. You can see like he's trying to keep his composure because he doesn't want to let on that this is not planned. But you can see him almost do like a little twitch and like a look to the side because he's like, what the? This is just not normal behavior for someone in a press conference, for someone that has just been through the traumatic experience that Tracie has apparently just been through. Tracie is just really taking command of this press conference. She's speaking directly to the camera. She is so confident in how she's speaking and her delivery of the story. There is absolutely no hesitation at all. And the journalists that were in the room were a little bit thrown by Tracie and just how confident she was because they're used to having to prompt the person like doing the press conference. They're used to having to ask the questions and really try and get the information out of the person because quite understandably, they're traumatized from whatever they've just been through, and they're also not used to a situation where they're sat in front of so many people on TV. The journalists have to normally drag the information out of them, but not Tracie. She's really taken control of this. So much so that it almost feels a little bit rehearsed. So when Tracie finishes rambling on, telling her story and everything, journalists start asking questions and they just want clarification on a few of the simple details, you know, not difficult questions or anything like that. And one journalist just comes out and says, the timelines don't add up here. So you're telling me that you left the pub at 9:45, you drove home, which only takes 10 minutes, but then it was 10:45 that the attack apparently happened. What the hell happened in that hour? And I want to know what happened in this hour as well. But this is the first time that Tracie falls silent. This is the first time that her mask, if you will, falls a little bit because she doesn't know what to do here because she was probably just expecting that no one would question her because she's a victim in this. Like, why would anyone question her? Well, you know what, Tracie, when your story doesn't add up, people are going to question you. And Tracie doesn't actually answer this question. She's just looking really shifty and uncomfortable, to which the police end the press conference there. I don't know why they decided to end the press conference though. If I was one of those police officers, I would have been like, yeah, Tracie, what the hell happened in that hour? Why don't you answer that for us? So it's not just the police now that are suspicious of Tracie. All of the journalists, well, I can't say all of the journalists, but probably most of the journalists that were in that room were suspicious of Tracie as well. And then a few days later, on the 4th of December, Tracie was rushed to the hospital after an overdose. She had written a suicide letter to her daughter and just expressed that she couldn't go on anymore. She couldn't live without Lee. And then after writing this suicide letter, she did take a load of pills, but she was found and she was rushed to the hospital and her stomach was pumped and she survived. And whilst Tracie was in the hospital recovering from this, the police were actually making some breakthroughs on the case that definitely put into question Tracie's story. A couple had come forward after seeing the press conference on TV and said that they were actually driving on the same road as Lee and Tracie on the same night as Lee and Tracie And they even saw Lee and Tracie on that road. And the couple distinctively remember Lee and Tracie because of Lee's car. Like, it was quite a unique car, so it stood out to them. So this couple were driving behind Tracie and Lee on the exact same road that Tracie had claimed that these attackers were chasing them. But this couple that had come forward had said that this was completely impossible. Like, this was a really long, narrow, windy country road. Like, you notice other cars around you because you have to be really alert when you're driving down those roads. Like, I don't drive down those roads. They make me way too nervous. But they said that it was impossible because there was just no other cars around. And the couple said that they could even tell that Lee and Tracie were arguing, or there were definitely something going on because of the way Lee was driving. Like, he was driving all over the place. And then another witness came forward. A little girl had come forward that lived in a nearby house and said that she could hear two people arguing. But the two people that were arguing was a man and a woman, not two men, which is what Tracie claims. So Tracie's story is really falling apart here. So police now have witnesses that contradict Tracie's story. Plus, they already have their suspicions of Tracie anyway. And this is enough for the police to just be like, yeah, well, I think we need to arrest Tracie Andrews. So on the 7th of December, when Tracie is still in hospital, the police go and arrest her for the murder of Lee Harvey. However, she is granted bail and is released and allowed to go live at home. And it is at this point that the media go crazy on this story because it's like everyone has been following this story. Tracie made a national TV appearance with her press conference. Everyone has been following this story.
Good afternoon. Detectives investigating the murder of a man in last week's so-called road rage attack have arrested a 27-year-old woman.
So when it came out that she had been arrested for the murder that she was claiming to be victim of, you can imagine the shock and everyone went crazy. So many people watched that press conference that Tracie gave that her fiance had been murdered out of a road rage attack. But now it's been revealed that she's been lying the whole time and literally tried to fool the whole nation. So you can imagine, of course, how big this story became. And the paparazzi followed Tracie everywhere. Now, I feel like a normal person, if they were in this situation, they would just stay at home, they would lay low, they wouldn't want to be in the papers. But Tracie is not normal and she loves attention, so she was out all of the time getting snapped by paparazzi. She probably loved this. She was out living her life. She was partying all the time, acting like she hasn't just killed her fiance. So when the trial begins in Birmingham Crown Court in July of 1997, Tracie is still sticking to her original story that she is a victim, that these two random men came and attacked her and her fiance and murdered her fiance. And of course, she pleads not guilty. However, of course, she's lying, so the prosecution just start chipping away at her story bit by bit. They start by bringing character witnesses in, and we all know what Tracie's character was like, so that definitely didn't help her, did it? And then the prosecution, from all of the evidence and everything that they've gathered, presented to the jury the events of the 30th of November and what actually happened. So they say that Tracie and Lee were at the pub, like they were, but you remember the argument that they had earlier on in the day about Lee dropping his daughter home. You remember that? So the prosecution think that Tracie didn't drop this argument, and the arguments kind of carried on in the pub, you know, which is what spilled out into the car when they left, which is what the witnesses saw. And the argument in the car got so like heated that Lee pulled over, and this is when they were shouting in the street, which is what their little girl heard. And then Tracie, in a fit of rage from this argument, took out a little Swiss Army knife from the glove box in the car and attacks Lee. And Lee had fought for his life, which explains Tracie's injuries to her face. However, the initial stab wound to Lee had weakened him so much that he was unable to fight Tracie off completely. So Tracie managed to overpower Lee and stab him a total of 42 times, which I just want to point out is very, very excessive. There was plenty of time for Tracie to actually realize what she was doing and stop. 42 times. 42 times. So the evidence that the prosecution had against Tracie was the blood spatter, and the pattern that it made on Tracie's top could have only come from somebody attacking someone with a knife. Also, they had found bits of the Swiss Army knife like in the bushes, like at the crime scene, because you know, like a Swiss Army knife has all those like things. Clearly some had broken off in the attack. And then there is evidence of Tracie disposing of the murder weapon. Remember when she was in hospital and she kept going to the bathroom? Well, guess what she was doing in the bathroom? Flushing the knife down the toilet. I don't know why she had to go to the bathroom so many times. Maybe she just kept going back to check that it had actually flushed and it didn't come back up. There was also evidence in the boots Tracie was wearing on that night. So when they were examined, they found a bloody imprint on the inside of the boot, which matched exactly to a Swiss Army knife. So basically she'd stabbed Lee 42 times, and then with the Swiss Army knife she had slotted it into her boot to then get rid of at the hospital. And then another significant piece of evidence that the prosecution found was that there was a clump of Tracie's hair in Lee's hand. 80 strands to be exact, which is a hell of a lot of hair when you think about it. And that would have only come from someone fighting for their life. I think Tracie tried to claim that Lee like reached up to her or something. I don't know, I can't quite remember. He's not gonna reach up to you when he's like on the floor after this attack and pull out 80 strands of your hair. Like, who are you trying to kid, Tracie? Of course, the jury sees straight through Tracie. They don't believe her at all. And they do find her guilty unanimously, and she receives a life sentence with the minimum of 14 years. But the story doesn't end there. Tracie actually had quite an interesting time in prison as well. And while she is in prison, she is still making headlines in the tabloid newspapers. Tracie does try to appeal her sentence because she said that the jury were biased because of all of the media coverage that happened on her case, which of course could be true, but she's still guilty, so it was denied. So because this didn't work, Tracie decided to change up her tactic, and what does she do? She changes her story. She now admits to the murder. But her new story is that she was acting in self-defense. She said that Lee had been abusing her, which there is no evidence of whatsoever. And it's just like, Tracie, do you literally have no shame? Like, seriously. She then caused public outrage because it was discovered that Tracie had had cosmetic surgery on the NHS while she was in prison. She had cosmetic surgery to correct her protruding jaw, which cost the taxpayers £5,000. And the public just felt like it was a kick in the teeth. Like, why are we paying for cosmetic surgery for somebody that is in prison for murder? Like, I've actually never heard of this happening before. Like, what? Of course, there could have been legitimate medical reasons why she did have this surgery. I don't know, and I couldn't find any. She was also described as a shopaholic whilst in prison. How? How can you be a shopaholic when you're in prison? But anyway, she would get lots of letters and donations from the public, which she was able to use that money to buy lots of beauty products when she was in prison. And she became known to be somewhat of a beauty guru. When she was in prison, she would give tips and tricks to the other prisoners on like how to do their hair and how to do their makeup. It's just like, wow. So you're having cosmetic surgery and you're a shopaholic in prison. It doesn't really sound like prison to me. And much to the dismay of Lee's family, Tracie was released in July of 2011, aged only 42. When she came out of prison, she changed her name. She changed it to Tia Carter. She also dyed her hair dark, but this didn't stop the cameras from following her around, which she probably was secretly glad about. And since she has been released, she has remarried, and at her hen do for the wedding, she was photographed dressed as a police officer. And the hen do was just before Father's Day, and when these pictures were released to the public, it was actually on Father's Day, like they were in the newspaper on Father's Day. And can you imagine Lee's daughter having to see these photographs of the woman that murdered her father having a good time on her hen do on Father's Day? It's just so messed up. I just can't. That was the story of Tracie Andrews. She really is the worst, isn't she? Like, the arrogance of her. Seriously, it takes a special kind of someone to go on national TV and play the victim. when you're not. Something that I just can't wrap my head around with this case. It's like, I know that Tracie and Lee had quite a volatile relationship, but what happened? How did this escalate to murder? What happened? And what happened in that hour? So I don't think we'll ever really know the motive of why it escalated. But there is a theory as to how she came up with the story that she did. About a week prior to the murder of Lee, another infamous UK case happened, the M25 killing, which is basically just somebody that was on the M25 and out of road rage killed somebody right there on the M25. And friends and family of Tracie were with her when she was seeing this coverage of the M25 killing, and she seemed really interested in this case. So a lot of people think that Tracie got the inspiration for Lee's murder and that someone killed him out of road rage from the M25 killing. She even mentioned road rage in the press conference that she had, saying that road rage can change people. I think she just kind of wanted to play it off like, oh, this happens. Like, look, it happened last week. Oh, it's happened again. And I think because of the M25 killing, I think Tracie probably thought that no one would question her. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on this case. Like, do you think that Tracie Andrews should just be out there living? Because she is just out there living her life. I think she's even changed her name again from Tia Carter. I don't know what her name is now. I think it's like Jane something. I don't know. She probably has even changed her name again. So yeah, let me know your theories on this case down in the comments. As always, let me know your case suggestions of future cases you want me to cover. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye.